Hello, this is Angela Lee, and I am so honored and thankful to have Serena and Liz of Sustainable Happiness together here with me so we can talk about the importance of being present. So, Liz and Serena, do either one of you want to jump in and talk a little bit about it?
Sure, I feel like we now know there's so much science behind being present. It's easier said than done many times, but we've got to be actively engaging with people to have those connections and to create more happiness in our day. Because many times you can see families out and they're all on their cell phones and they're not connecting and having that time together and being present. So I would like to encourage everyone to make it a challenge for yourself to see how much more happiness you can have when you create those connections by being present.
Well, I would add to that, challenge sometimes can feel super challenging, but if we can make it a game and to have fun with it and realize that it can actually create magical experiences when we put the phones away. And one of the things that I find really disappointing as a mother of three, when I see parents in the supermarket and their child is on a little phone instead of counting apples and talking about the color of oranges and looking at the weight of things and using the supermarket as an opportunity for not only learning but also connection between the parent and the child. And so I think that's another way you can be present with your child, but also like being present with your spouse, and or your partner or your friends, and just really listening can create a magical experience as well.
Mm. And I would say that often we don't even realize that we're not being present. People may be listening to us talking, but doing something else on their computer. That's not being present. When I see parents in the playground scrolling through Instagram or TikTok or whatever on their phone while their kid is trying to get their attention to show them that they can slide down the slide. And, that's a moment that is magical for parent and child to celebrate that I did this new thing. I expanded my abilities by climbing this really high ladder to get down the slide. And that's lost because the parent is focused on their phone.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I agree.
unfortunate because there's so many different distractions in our world. And how can we be conscious of, like, okay, notice what you're noticing, to just check in every once in a while, because we're all susceptible to doing this and we've all done it. Like, oh, we've got a phone in our pocket and it's, buzzing. I need to check it when you're actually
Right.
having a conversation with somebody, but you don't have to check it. It'll still be there when you're finished. And so I think we all need to be conscious of that.
Hmm. And Liz, what do you have about that?
Well, absolutely. Just putting the phones away can be a real discipline, but it can be, like I said, a magical discipline, and also just being able to be still with our own thoughts and recognize when we're seeking that dopamine hit. Right?
Hmm.
Um, I this a video scrolled past my Instagram this morning, and it was this gentleman talking about, what do you bow to? And he was saying, do you bow to the Amazon package that comes? Do you bow to the computer? Do you bow to your phone? Do you bow to the drugs or alcohol? And it's all just in the realm of our brains seeking that dopamine hit. And it personally, for me, as somebody who has struggled with anxiety, I find that the more I meditate, so I meditate every morning, and on those odd days when I accidentally miss meditating because I do it first thing in the morning, I notice I'm more susceptible to those dopamine urges. And I'm not as settled and I'm not as present in the moment. And I can start to observe my brain's desire to be seeking that dopamine hit that is just a habit in a lot of situations, I think.
Hmm. That is a beautiful thing to bring into it because I never thought about the dopamine response. and how we get addicted to our phones for that dopamine. And it's interesting because you can get an even bigger just feeling of awe when you do stop and be present and notice the beauty around you. I live in the mountains and I can look out my front window and be very present with Taos Mountain because it's just the splendor of that mountain. And if I'm not present, I might not notice the way the clouds move by, or I might not notice the birds flying. Those are the gifts that are in our life for us to notice. Cyrena, what do you say about that?
Well, I would say that, many times we're racing from one thing to the next and we don't have the built-in time to be, okay, I'm going to give myself 5 minutes before I got to run to the next meeting, or I've got to be on this next Zoom or whatever it is. And I think it's important to schedule that time, because if you don't, you're going to lose it. And as Liz mentioned about meditation, I'm an avid meditator because there's so much brain science behind how when you meditate, you're able to be more focused. And it also helps with your brain health in general, and brings more calmness to your day. And so I would really encourage people to do that. And plus, you can definitely have fun catching more happiness when you are present with each other. And we've got a game, Liz and I, on our course called Catch Happiness, or Be Present to Catch Happiness. Would you like to learn how to play it?
I would love to.
So we encourage families or friends to get together, and each person in the group writes down 3 different activities, group activities that brings them happiness. And they write them on individual pieces of paper. And then you put all pieces of paper into a jar. And once a week, or whatever time frame works for you, you set aside at least an hour or 2, but you pull out this piece of paper the night before. And the rules to this game is that you put away your phone, you shut off the TV, you're present, you don't have any distractions for that hour or 2, whatever time frame you decide. And maybe it's like you pull it out the night before, so you have all the ingredients or the equipment that you need. And maybe it's like cooking dinner together, or playing Pictionary, or a board game, or karaoke, or a dance party, whatever it might be. And you might be like, I really don't want to do this, but it's something one of your friends picked, or your family. And to be present, be silly, nourish the inner child, have fun, and just give yourself that hour or 2 to be present and to see what kind of laughter and connections are created during that time.
That is a wonderful way for families to be present together. And I love the idea of having a jar filled with, these things that make us happy, because it is, well, wait, I want to back up a little. Cyrena, what is your saying about being present?
The past is history, the future is a mystery, but the moment is a present. And I think we have to remind ourselves of that, because many times we worry about the future and we have regrets about the past.
When I have a download on my website for parents that's called Helping Your Child Through Anxiety. And presence is one of the top ways to get out of anxiety, because when you are thinking about the future or the past, you are not in the present. And if you have a big worry, like, how am I going to pay that bill at the end of this month? And you keep thinking about, you're always in the future thinking about what will happen. But when you can say, is that happening right now? That snaps you back into the present. And you can do that with your child if they're worrying about something. Hey, is that test happening right now? No. Be here. Be in the now. And then worries and anxieties do not have to control your life.
For a while, yeah. And I was just gonna, I love that you mentioned all that. I teach mindfulness to young children, and I talk about that a lot. I talk about how it can, mindfulness meditation can help them focus or alleviate worries or anxiety. But another thing I think about being present is getting still enough to realize what you're feeling and then label it. And then once you realize what you're feeling, like, oh, this is that anxiety again, you can stop it in its tracks. And then another way I have found to shift that is to go to gratitude. I am so
Mhm.
very happy and thankful now that, you know, the test isn't today, it's in a week, or the bill isn't due right now, it's due in 3 weeks, and I can be creative in
Right.
how I'm going to pay it. You can get more creative when you're able to get present and then go to that gratitude to shift you out of whatever emotional spiral you may have been in, right?
That's so wonderful. The addition of what I notice when I'm present, I am more grateful because I'll notice the way a cat slinks through my yard and I'll think, oh, that's such a gift. Thank you, cat, for, showing me your sleekness as you wander through my yard. And that in that presence, it's almost easier to be grateful.
Yeah, and I think we notice more things because there's good and bad in our world. And what are you going to focus on? And when you're present, you're able to be more like, okay, I can see the beauty around me, as you said, Angela. You're not focusing on the trauma and politics or this or that or whatever's going on in our world. You're here and you're safe at this moment. And
Yeah. When I think about when I used to drive my car I'd commute to work and how I would be so not present that I could arrive at home or arrive at work and not remember the drive at all. And that is, just a way of being that many of us exist in. And I used to exist in that before meditation, before being able to be still and with myself.
Yeah, I've had that experience too. I used to have an hour-long commute each way, and I would have a similar experience, which is kind of scary. That was 20
Oh,
plus years ago, but to be able to
yeah.
drive for an hour and not really remember the journey. And like you say, like along the journey, even in a drive, like you might notice a sunset or a cloud in the sky, or even just chuckle at somebody doing something funny in a car next to you, and just, I don't know, have something to laugh about. I discovered audiobooks and have found that I've been able to distract myself from long commutes with audiobooks, and then I'm immersed in a story, and you can get, you don't want to be too distracted that you miss important things on the road, but turning that frustration that was almost borderline road rage. I lived in Atlanta for 2 years and had an
Mm,
hour each way commute, and it was just horrific, and discovered audiobooks, and it just shifted everything. I just started enjoying the story instead of being angry at being in traffic. And also just the awareness that, someone who's doing something crazy in traffic, this is another way you can get really present. Like if somebody honks at you or cuts you off, they may have something incredibly stressful going on for them. Like maybe they might be rushing to the hospital, or who knows what's causing them to be so frantic on the highway, and we don't know what they're dealing with. But if we
mm,
can come back into ourselves, right, and let them be, we'll just back off and let them have their moment, and hopefully that nobody gets hurt in the process.
mm. That's a beautiful, just way, having the understanding that we don't know what others are going through. And when we are in judgment of how someone behaves, oftentimes there is something behind that behavior. And just holding the idea that, well, they might be going through something allows us to come at them without judgment, but with understanding. And that's a more gentle and tolerant way of being in the world. But I also wanted to note when Liz was talking about listening to audiobooks and how that allowed her to not become fully immersed in the behavior of other drivers because she was somewhat immersed in her audiobooks. The focus of your attention is basically what you're going to experience. So if you choose to focus on how other people are driving, then you're going to experience how other people are driving. If you choose to focus on yourself or the beauty around you, that's what you'll experience.
Yeah, what's fascinating is the reticular activating system. Are you familiar with that, Angela?
Yes, I
Yeah,
am.
and it's just fascinating because it's like the bouncer of the brain. And what you program your brain with, it will notice more of that. And are you going to program it with the good in our world or the bad in our world? Or, what are you going to focus on? And another thing, too, is like many times in life, people are on autopilot. They're not being engaging. They're not being, like we said, not being present. And how can we be conscious of, like, hey, am I actually being who I want to be? Am I being interactive? Am I creating connections with people? Because I think many times we're just going on autopilot from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, and don't take time for ourselves or relationships or making our lives better.
Hmm. Yeah, I was reflecting on walking through New York, and everybody is like so focused on going where they're going that it's almost like the humanity around them is not even noticed. And when I was in England, they kept saying, "Well, you must be from California because you're always looking in people's eyes and smiling." And I'm like, yeah, that's like, you're human and I want to acknowledge you.
Well, that's a nice gift to share with people because many times they don't think of doing that.
Yeah. And that's like being present when you're walking, right?
Mhm.
When you're
Mhm.
noticing the people around you. And what is being present, really? Liz or Cyrena, do you want to speak to that?
Well, I think it's getting really centered and focused on this moment right now. I always tell the kids or even adults, like, it's now and it's now and it's now, right?
Mhm.
My favorite definition of mindfulness is being present in this moment without judgment. So
Mm.
observing, having the skill of observation and being able to take that, not the eagle's view necessarily, but maybe the squirrel view, from the tree above, just observing and trying to remove any judgment around what's happening. And I think that comes into play when we talk about traffic, but also the news, right? Because the news headlines are designed to trigger us. They
Mhm.
sell ads and it used to be papers, by getting those headlines to be as scary or triggering or
Fearful.
intriguing as possible so that we go, I need to know more. And that fear that is then created isn't real. Like the things are happening, the occurrences are happening, but the fear is in us, right? It's not the paper creating the fear. It's the paper saying this in a way that we then experience fear. So when we can stop and go, wait a minute, okay, what of this is in my control right now? And I'm glad you mentioned this being present because I think this is an important thing with everything going on in the world right now. I don't think we should ignore what's going on in the world. I think the world needs a lot of compassion and care and love. But with a lot of the battling that's going on in the Middle East and some of these things that are going on, I need to check in with myself before I freak out and go, how much can I do about this situation? And am I able to be present for my husband, for my business partner, for my children, for my aging parents, for my sister and her family, if I'm stressed to the max? And I think it can then it can affect us physically. We can end up sick or have ailments. And if we're not taking care of ourselves, so I think being present to how like the news is affecting us, then we can start to protect ourselves from the triggering headlines, but then, just be aware, but then aware of how we need to practice self-care. And maybe that looks like meditation, eating well, exercising, stretching, getting enough sleep, whatever it is, spending that quality time with a child or a loved one, doing the happiness game. I can help people by taking care of myself. I can be stronger for them when they need a shoulder to cry on, or if they've actually experienced something really traumatic,
I do. It
Yeah.
it's such a, what I tell parents is self-love is not selfish, and self-care isn't self-love. And so, self-care is a minor portion of self-love. And we cannot pour from an empty cup. So we need to take care of ourselves, be present with our emotions, I think is, in my book, the number one thing that we need to do. And then be taking care. If we need to break off and not watch the TV news because it's overwhelming, turn it off. No one ever died from not watching the news. And further, the other thing that I find really revealing is I don't think that there's anyone ever going to be on their deathbed saying, I should have scrolled through my phone more.
Right. Exactly.
I think that there will be a lot of parents who look back on their kids' childhood who say, oh, I wish I put my phone down.
Mm-hmm.
That breaks my heart because loneliness is becoming the new pandemic. And loneliness is creating so much as far as anxiety, depression, and also, unfortunately, suicide in young children. And I think, that's one thing too. Yes, we've got all these different ways to be connected, but are we really connecting? And if we're present, we're able to make more connections and not feel that level of loneliness that people are experiencing now.
The difference between meeting someone on a phone or even through Zoom. I mean, Zoom is a better connection than scrolling through a Facebook feed. But the difference between live connection and even this Zoom thing is huge. When I'm live with someone, I can touch them. I can look them deeply in the eyes, and I can connect energetically in a way that is just not really possible. Well, I know it's not possible at all through social media.
Well, and I would add to that everyone just wants to be seen, heard, and valued, right? They want to feel like they're contributing something. And I think that it doesn't have to take a lot of time. Like when you were talking about the child on the playground, if the parent could just put their phone down and acknowledge them, and say, great job, or, oh, that looks like that makes you so happy, or what a great way to be courageous and try something new.
Yeah.
How long did that take to just say that and help them feel seen, heard, and valued, right?
I love that. And I think that that's where we're going to end this, because that is so key to parenting. And I know for parents, it's hard. You have so many pulls on you. You have jobs, you have family, household, all these things to do. but it only takes a moment for you to be present with your kid. And that moment is going to be the time you cherish in your memories. And so will your child. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I thank Liz and Irina because you brought such brilliance and wisdom to this, and I appreciate you.
Thank you.